through some of the topics this interesting panel session is going to cover. New development in vital allergen management, the challenges of allergen analysis, food allergen contamination risk, and how to control them at food plant, and many more. And now, ladies and gentlemen, with a big round of applause, please help me welcome the honorable panel members in the order of the sequence. Our first panel member, welcoming him on stage, Mr. Satish Reddy, Head Quality Assurance from Dodla Dairy. A big round of applause to Satish ji. Satish ji, welcome to the stage. Joining next, we have Ms. Ranjeet Kaur, Program Lead Scientific and Regulatory Affairs, Mars Wrigley. A big round of applause to Ranjeet ji. Welcome to the stage. Joining next, we have Mr. Prabhakar Mishra, Associate Director, Food Regulatory Affairs, Perfetti, Melle, India. Big round of applause to Prabhakar ji. Prabhakar ji, always an honor to have you in our panels. Joining next, we have Shreya Pandey, Associate Director and Regulatory Affairs, PepsiCo. A big round of applause to Shreya ji. Shreya ji, welcome to the panel. Joining next, we have Ritesh, Madvaiya, Senior Manager Quality and Food Safety, India Head, Mars. A big round of applause to Ritesh. Ritesh, welcome to the panel. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome the honorable moderator of the panel, Mr. Navneet Mehta, Global Quality Director, Food and Refreshments from Unilever. A big round of applause to Navneet ji. Navneet ji, all over to you. Fantastic panel session, and who better than you to moderate the same, and wishing a fantastic panel ahead.
Okay, very good afternoon to all of you. So I must say that it is my privilege to host a very interesting set of panel members. And the topic is something which is emerging and becoming closer to heart from the food industry point of view. It is a big talk globally, and that is naturally getting transmitted to India as well. So, what are allergens? Allergens are those constituents of the food which induce adverse immune system to act in an adverse manner, and they react and then create some kind of harmful effect in the human body. We have been talking so much about vital. Now, what is this vital all about? So, before we talk about vital, we are all familiar with PAL, which is the precautionary allergen labeling. Now, precautionary allergen labeling is something which food manufacturers use to bring onto the label declaration if there are any incidental traces of allergens which might have crept into the food product, either knowingly or unknowingly. But they are supposed to be incidental, not by design. Now, what is vital? Vital is a concept which has been coined by an non-governmental organization, rather an industry organization by the name Allergen Bureau. Now, Allergen Bureau has its inception somewhere in 2005, and it actually got started in the ANZ, which is Australia and New Zealand. But gradually it has gained global prominence, and now it is having a very strong presence in Europe and Northern America. So what Allergen Bureau has done over the years is they have put a lot of research into the impact of food allergens and what could be the threshold value of a particular allergen in a food which can really pose risk to the end consumer. Now, when we talk of end consumers, people who are allergic to any of the allergens, it is growing globally year on year. But as a ballpark, today it would be, if you look at children, less than 3 years, it would be around 6 to 8%. So 6 to 8% of children are allergic to some of the food substances. And in the adult population, it would be around something like 5%. So what is this VITAL which they have come up with? VITAL stands for, it is an acronym which stands for Voluntary Incidental Allergen Trace Labeling. So this is what VITAL is all about. Of late, we have been hearing of VITAL version 3. Now, Vital version 3 had come out in, I think, in fourth quarter of 2019. And with continuous research, Allergen Bureau keeps coming up with list of allergens and the threshold limit for each of these allergens, which can be declared as safe enough to be part of the food product. Not getting into too much of details of Vital version 3, what I would suggest is that we will go through this, and we have got some very eminent panelists who will give us reflection not only from the manufacturing and consumer safety perspective, but also from the emerging regulatory trends which are happening in the space of allergens. So without now spending too much time on the context setting, I would like to pose my first query to Prabhakar. So what I would like to know from you is that what are the regulatory requirements in India with respect to the food allergens? And maybe in the same context, you can also really allude any specific requirements under the food law which are pertinent to this.
Thank you so much, Navneet, and good afternoon, everyone. So basically, we know that food is governed by FSSAI in India. Until November 2020, there was no regulation as such as regards allergen labeling or list of the allergen. So it was November 2020 when FSSAI notified revised labeling and display regulations, wherein they actually listed 8 allergens, means food ingredients or foods which are having substances which are allergic. So they are basically first ingredients containing gluten, for example, wheat, barley, oats, etc. Then it is crustaceans, milk and milk products, and then fish and fish products, peanuts and nuts tree, then your basically soya products or products which contain soy and sulfur dioxide. So till that time, basically companies were declaring on voluntary basis. It was not mandatory, but after 2020, it was made mandatory. And from July 1st this year, it has been now assessed for compliance. If the labels do not contain any, as Navneet said, that precautionary allergen labeling, then those labels or packed food will be non-compliant. So basically, we need to have a declaration like contains, then name of the allergen. So if it contains any milk product, so it has to have contains milk, not like curd or any milk product, but we have to write milk as such. And so these are the actually requirements which have been laid down by the FSSAI. And in terms of any specific legislation, so suppose there are no ingredients added in the product as an allergen, but there are chances of contamination, means cross-contamination. So in that case, we have to give any statement on the pack, which is not mandatory, but voluntary, that may contain so and so, means out of those 8 allergenic substances which I stated. So basically, FSSAI has notified these things as of now. So only these 8 allergens are listed there and are supposed to be declared on the food level. Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Prabhakar.
Thank you.
So what I will do is I will take it to Ranjeet because now that it is as of now clear that from FSSAI perspective there are 8 allergens which are listed. Although globally there are multiple allergens, but we will talk of these 8 in the Indian context of FSSAI. But taking it from there to how are organizations preparing or are going to prepare for managing implementation of this regulatory requirement from FSSAI? And what do you see as challenges which might be encountered to really implement them?
Thanks, Navneet. So just as Prabhakar spoke about the requirement with regard to the regulation, so any regulatory change, is difficult to implement. So I would say that once it gets implementable stage, you should get yourself involved right from the draft stage. because that's where you know that what is coming on your way, right? And you need to educate all the stakeholders which will get impacted. So it's not just the FPOs, but also the suppliers or the consumers, right? And bring back that impact back to, at the draft stage itself, that this is what is the operational aspect which will be challenging when that implementation will happen. So I think as an industry we did that, but when the implementation came in from voluntary to mandatory, we put that gear into fast track. So basically, there are various ways by which suppliers were giving that information, right from the certificate of analysis or giving the label on their products, right? So we educated them that they have to get into this requirement and the compliance is a must. And this is where the suppliers were actually put into place, that this is how they need to ensure compliance. Then comes the manufacturers, right? We taking those raw materials from those suppliers. So we made our system so robust in terms of what is going from the ingredients, what are the threshold levels, and what is coming from the cross-contamination. And finally, we had to put on our labels, right? That what is it coming on this. So this is how the implementation happened with various stakeholders, right from suppliers to the manufacturers, and then finally to the label, and then consumer. Because ultimately, the regulator made the regulation, FBO implemented that regulation, but it's ultimately meant for the consumer, to be there. So I would say that a lot of challenges are still existing in terms of this allergen stuff. There is a complex supply chain which is there, right? So your supplier may be taking the raw material from another one. There can be transportation issues on that aspect. And then coming to the analytical part of it, right? So the thresholds are so low, sometimes the analytical method, in terms of reliability, variations in those methods and sampling aspect of it itself is a challenge. And we are seeing a new trend with regard to the claims which are coming. You have gluten-free claim. So you need to do some more robust testing, to justify or substantiate that particular claim. But at the end, I can say that, the major challenge remains at the consumer end, because it is ultimately consumer awareness that everybody has to work on. Because I'll just give you an example that when we implemented this change, wherein it contains milk, but if a consumer looks at the ingredient line, he has actually questioned that there is no milk in the ingredient line, right? So it's that is the awareness, which consumer has, that you're putting allergen, but there is no milk in this. So what is it about? So I would say that everybody has a role to play in terms of creating that awareness, so that what is being done for implementation actually makes an impact. So that's what I can say on this.
Yeah, and in fact, the onus of educating the consumers or bringing that awareness will lie primarily on the manufacturers and the marketeers. No doubt on that. So with that, let me now turn to Shreya. Now, interestingly, and this is something I must share with you, Shreya is co-chairing the FICCI Codex cell, and she has been part of the team who has been interacting globally, of course under the leadership of FSSAI, with the Codex at the global level. So Shreya, my question to you would be, what are the latest global regulatory developments in the space of allergens in Codex?
Thank you, Navneet. Firstly, I must say that it is 2020 when India actually implemented allergen labeling, which is sad, because if you see the percentage of population who suffers with it, it is actually sad that we, implemented allergen labeling now. But having said that, what Indian regulator has done is picked up the base framework of it from Codex. But Codex itself, which is like a Bible for all regulators to look at, and especially India because it's a WTO signatory, is undergoing a change in the allergen labeling. There was a formation of an expert panel under FAO-WHO, and over the last 2 years they've conducted 4 or 5 meetings to relook at both the list, which is the top 8 allergens which currently exist in our regulation, and to reassess whether they have or significance with respect to the global allergies and hypersensitivities in today's world. And what has come out, and this is a part of the Food Labeling Committee, and there's an e-working group which is working on it, which is talking about a change in the listing, first of all. And there will be certain allergens which have lower potency, which would be removed from the list, and a few which have greater potency would be added. For example, sesame is now being considered to be added into the top allergens globally. On the other hand, the data on severity, etc., for oats is very little. It's only certain cross contact that it can have from crops at a farm level, which would lead to its allergency, but per se oats is not considered to be an allergen. So that will probably be removed. The second thing which is happening is that Codex did not have the concept of cross contact or precautionary allergen labeling, and that is getting introduced into Codex now. There's a detailed guideline which would be made on precautionary allergen labeling, which will take into account aspects from Vital, but it will not have probably the rigor that Vital has, because Codex needs to look at it globally. So for example, it may not have RFD01, it may take RFD05 to begin with.
And maybe you can take a moment to explain what is RFD0 to RFD5, and for the understanding of the audience.
I'm not a large toxicologist, and I would bend to you to add on, but I can begin to say that, they are set when 99% of the population would be covered by the numbers which are given, the exposure limit which is given there, versus a 95% of the population which would be covered from the exposure assessment number which you would take to determine whether an allergen is fit to be put under the may contain labeling. And please add on, Navneet. I'm sure you are.
No, you summarized it very well.
So yeah.
Let's proceed rather than interrupting.
So that's the second part which is coming, because when the allergen labeling was coming into India, and you all in the regulatory domain as well as our food safety and quality experts used to say, but how do you determine it? How do you assess whether a particular allergen needs to be put into the may contain line, which is a more tricky one. The formulated one, you know. If it is in the formulation, then you put it. India, incidentally, also we have lots of small-scale manufacturers. So for them to conduct a quantitative risk assessment is going to be another challenge. So therefore, now that we have embarked on a journey of putting allergen labeling, the next phase, which is going to come very soon, is how to determine it, how are the industries gearing up. And another parallel aspect which is going on in the Food Hygiene Committee in Codex is to develop guidelines or code of practices to determine allergens in a plant line, which again is going to be very impactful, and the countries are going to take up their own guidances and their own regulatory aspects from it, which tells you how in a GMP setup do you determine paraffin. So I think those are the key couple of things, and maybe by next year early it'll throw up greater light in terms of how they finally form the parts. India is a part of most of those Codex discussions. I'm sure in a year's time the same will start flowing into India. So it's time we gear up and see what we can do as manufacturers.
Absolutely. So the key message here is that while Codex is evolving and bringing them onto the table, in Indian operations we need to start gearing up for the same. Okay. So now, with this backdrop of the regulatory space in which allergens are evolving, or the requirements against allergens are evolving in the regulatory space, what do we do in the manufacturing environment? So, Ritesh, may I turn to you to really bring out some insights from Mars? Because Ritesh, you are leading the quality and food safety function in Indian operations for Mars. What are the best practices which you would advise from the food manufacturer's perspective? And what are the opportunities or areas to really minimize this risk of cross-contamination?
Thank you, Navneet. Good afternoon, everyone. I think as a responsible manufacturer, we all should have a goal of not only preventing, but making sure that we have right controls at each stage of our supply chain to identify and to control any cross-contamination of the allergen. Not going into the basics, but in the today's context, I think there are two subjects which I would want to put more emphasis on is one, precautionary allergen labeling, And the second is a deep dive into the supply chain part of it. Talking about precautionary allergen labeling, I think it's gaining more and more proliferation, more and more expansion of precautionary allergen labeling, because obviously the awareness is increasing. The consumers are becoming more aware, they are afraid of the kind of chances of any cross-contamination, especially when it comes to agro-commodity related products. However, the other side of it, I think we are also limiting the choices for consumers, right? So that's one. The second is, are we having a right approach of deep dive into our supply chain, where the cross-contamination sort of risk can happen not only from the mainstream, not only from our manufacturing setup, but also from the upstreams, right? How far we go to understand that where are we getting the supplies from? You know, are we reaching up to the end stage of the mile where we can get to know what are the chances of contamination from the ingredient or from the supplies we are getting from the downstream, right? So these are the 2 points I think which gives us an area of opportunity for preventing and to make sure that consumers are safe. Talking more about the precautionary allergen labeling, I think the expansion of the PAL is because no manufacturer wants to get into any issue because of some amount of allergen present. No one wants to get into an issue of having any legal or regulatory obligation, taking any market related action, and that's why the safest option is precautionary allergen labeling is kind of getting expansion. However, as I said, we are limiting the consumer choices, so let's be mindful of that fact also. In a way, what we are doing, we are putting the consumers in a zone where they have to take a risk-based approach, right, by putting the PAL. Moreover that, the other area of work need to be is around the scientific or the quantitative risk management of the allergen, where the vital comes into picture, right? Because of the lack of the quantitative risk management process, we are not able to quantify and take the right decisions on the PAL kind of subjects. We are not able to determine whether we should label it or not label it, is it required or not required, and we are always into the field of over labeling or limiting the consumer choices. We are talking about the vital. I think recently there has been a lot of paper published. I think the experts touched about the vital thing, where there are advocacies which kind of guides us that how the vital 3.0 is helping taking some of the decisions around the PAL. But it all depends upon the analytical capability also, right? We all know that there are very limited methods, mostly ELISA-based methods are available, which are probably not so helpful in terms of precision. I think they vary from method to method, sample to sample, and probably not at the level of helping us making the right decisions. And that's where I think this is one of the big area, not only for the food manufacturer to work upon, but also to the analytical equipment manufacturers who can really get some advancement in making precision level methods and equipment for the allergen quantification of the risk. When it comes to supply chain part of it, I think every responsible manufacturer should have a goal of eliminating or preventing the risk of allergen right from design stage, right from the product development. I think we all should intend to avoid any addition of allergen unless it is not required for the product design, and that too of consumer value, right? Every management should have a commitment towards identification, controls, and the communication to consumer about the allergens. Also, not last but not least, the legal part of it, right? The quality and food safety regulatory requirements should be overarching, binding all of us for maintaining the highest level of standard for controlling the allergens in the food manufacturing setup. going deep dive into the supplies is very, very important, because we all know today the best practices and the methods to control the cross contamination of allergen in the manufacturing setup, which we are controlling. But are we going enough into the upstream? Are we going up to the level of crops where the largest risk of cross contamination can happen? And there has been a big incident in the past where the traces of the allergen cross contact found when there was a seasonal overlap between the two different crops, right? So as a responsible manufacturer, are we going up to that level is really a matter of thought, and we should have enough, material risk assessment reaching up to the last mile of understanding the cross contamination risk. But again, when it comes to supplies, we again will limit ourselves to the analytical control only. So I think in the analytical part, to quantify the risk management is really an area of work for us to strengthen ourselves, identifying the right level of risk and control. So I think these are the two areas, Navneet, I want to put more emphasis.
Thanks, Ritesh. Amongst various things, you have alluded a very tricky challenge in the upstream raw material supply, where there is a risk of cross-contamination, especially when the seasonal changes lead to change in the crops. And I know one such example has been between wheat and mustard. Generally, wheat and mustard are grown in the same fields. And wheat is an allergen, and for some, mustard is also an allergen. And if wheat is carrying traces of mustard, or vice versa, it can be a potential cross-contaminant from allergen perspective. So these are the challenges we need to carry back some homework for our procurement colleagues to really be wary of this. And as quality professionals, we'll have to really educate them that in the procurement, we have to look at these spaces as well. Well, Satish, over to you. We have talked on a lot of conceptual stage, but from the factory perspective, what are the important controls which we should envisage to manage allergens effectively? And what can be the risks in the manufacturing space which can lead to such allergen cross-contamination?
Yeah, thank you, sir. So as sir told, even around 4% of population facing allergen issues. So according to foodallergen.org website, 15 million people are 1 in 25 people have food allergens. Further, 1 in 13 kids facing food allergens. There is a report shows that 150 to 200 deaths per year from food allergens throughout the worldwide. So it is actually it is true, the sensitivity of allergens vary from people to people. Some people are able to consume which is contacted with the allergens like a healthy food. There is no issue. But some people are very sensitive. Who is a highly sensitive people must be extremely careful to avoid allergens, even the food has just prepared in the premises of an allergen. Also, it leads to severe health issues. So, even 1 ppm allergen in kg of food leads to the severe health issues who is the sensitive people. So, this is a really challenge. We can't neglect, okay, allergen people, 4% only we can't avoid. So, symptoms also vary from mild to the severe, such as heaviness and nausea, such as a mild one. And in severe, some problems are like breathing issues to even death. The report says that every 3 minutes, someone goes to the emergency room because of allergic reaction. So we can't predict how somebody reacts in these cases. So it is very important. We need to take care of every allergen at most care. So precisely around 170 foods are identified which cause allergic reactions, but surprisingly 90% of foods are allergens are coming from 8 big foods. Generally it is called big 8, like milk, egg, fish, soya, peanuts, tree nuts, and crustacea, shellfish, and gluten-contained cereals. So widespread problems are coming from these ingredients. When we are using as an ingredient in our foods, must declare, it's a mandatory, we need to declare on the labeling, it's mandatory. Same, yeah. So there is a no cure for allergens. So we need to just avoid the food allergens. So it is a prime responsibility for the manufacturer to make customer aware about food allergens which they used in their foods. It's mandatory to manufacturer to declare their allergens on their packed foods. If they used in the ingredient or just as cross-contamination as an allergen. So first we had to start from R&D, our application group. When they are preparing a new product, in the list of ingredients, is there any allergens, we must go and declare. Even we need to risk assessment on allergen risk assessment, each ingredient and process, what ratio we are getting, what threshold we are getting on the finished product, when must be risk assessment, everyone. Second, when we are purchasing from supplier, we have robust control at supplier. So maybe in our ingredient list there should not be any allergens, but when we are purchasing from allergens, purchasing from ingredients from supplier, he might be supplying allergens to some other industry. He is sharing same premises for non-allergen products also. So there is a chances of cross-contamination at vendor end. So we need a declaration for allergens. Is there any cross-contamination as an ingredient from his premises or cross-contamination? We need must declaration form. We need to take from each and every vendor, and we need to verify during audits either it is true or not. And same thing, second control is during transport and storage. Either it is coming from vendor side or once we received in our factory, we need to separate storage for allergens and non-allergens. Is there any cross-contamination also? It is affect the sensitive people health. So utmost care we have to take even at storage and transportation. Sometimes we are using common AHU for allergens processing area and non-allergen processing area. It is also leads to the cross-contamination. So we have to avoid common AHU, separate AHU, area handling unit for allergens and non-allergens. Even people, dedicated people are required from allergen process and non-allergen process. There should not be any cross-contamination. Design itself we have to take care, changeovers, separate for allergen handling products and non-allergen handling products. Even we need to take allergen as a hazard in a HACCP. Each flowchart we have to review and risk assessment and control, validate. If required, we need to declare on the label. Such way we can take care of our sensitive people, allergen sensitive people. Thank you.
Thanks, Satish. In fact, building on what Satish you mentioned, there are a couple of tips I would say, and this is something we have embarked upon in Unilever. That is, whenever there is a changeover in the factory, the changeover has to have a very strong validation program. So you might be making a product which contains milk, and the next product on the line might be without milk. And therefore it becomes extremely important that the changeover validation is carried out, that the next product by even the remotest of the possibility will not contain any traces of the milk which might have been used in the previous one. So that is one important thing. The second is new product introduction. When new product is introduced, a very strong regime of validation of the new product and what might be manufactured before that product and after that product needs to be really established in at the factory level. Just to add to Satish what you were mentioning.
Just to add on this point, Navneet, what Satish is also touched upon, I think two things. We all know the ingress of allergen cross contamination primarily can happen from source. So we all should maintain obviously the receiving conditions, the storage conditions, labeling. But we also should be ready for any kind of accidental spillover of the allergens. I think that readiness has to be ensured in advance, right? We have to be ready for that kind of scenario where any accidental spillover can happen. The second point, good practice I think Satish touched upon is about having common facilities like air handling units. I think at Mars we are very stringent around the environmental risk assessment for allergens. So we all do for the microorganism, but we also follow a very stringent risk assessment from an environmental risk assessment point of view for allergens. So yeah, I think these are some of the advancement in the best practices which we should follow for avoiding any cross contamination.
Thanks. So let me thank all my panel member colleagues. And we have a few minutes. I can see on the clock that we have around 6 minutes in hand. So if there are any questions or thoughts which are coming to your mind, we will be very happy to engage and interact, to pick up some questions or share some thoughts.
Thank you so much, Navneet ji, and floor is open. And we have one question. Sir, request you to please keep the hand raised because of the audience and the lights. Kindly introduce yourself and request you to keep the question brief.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Navneet, and all the panel members. Myself, Shailesh Tiwari from Hamdard. As you rightly said, there should be a very dedicated facility to control any cross-contamination from the allergens. Do we have any control on the source or vendor end, how they are maintaining their stocks to avoid any cross-contamination? It is very well decided that when we are receiving any material at that time, at our manufacturing facility, we are controlling it. But how they are maintaining? Is there any control, and what are the methodology you guys are adopting as a regulator or as the leaders in the zone? Yeah, thank you.
So first, from regulatory perspective, and then I can add to what we can do with the vendors. Shreya, would you like to?
I think from a regulatory perspective, I think what biggest mantra is that food safety, since it's a food safety issue, is everyone's responsibility in the chain. All you as a manufacturer are taking materials from your vendors who are also food business operators. And from a FSSAI point of view, everybody is responsible for that food which is manufactured, and not only the finished product manufacturer. So that mantra should be there as a quality mantra for everybody in our chain, backwards and forwards. And that's what we also follow as Pepsi. Second, I think Satish also picked up that point, is about declarations. If they know that they are going to be, or their product is going to be used to produce another product, and a lot of time, for example, I can tell you seasonings, there is no kill step in our process. We have to fully rely, for example, on potato chips for the seasoning, which is the seasoning manufacturer's entire control systems. And therefore, their declaration become very vital for us. What they give in terms of the declaration is what we eventually put on our packs. Or they add on to our packs along with the other ingredients that are used in it. And so therefore, there needs to be a robust system and that hand-in-hand shake that we will do. Third, I think we also, from a quality perspective, and others can add because I'm not directly into quality, but their controls in terms of their HACCPs, GMPs, etc. need to be taken into account, because that helps my food safety expert determine my precautionary allergen labeling. So if it is flowing from there and he is not able to underwrite it, then I would have to declare. But the policy which most organizations, and let me speak for myself, there are other organizations, we have a zero PAL policy currently, that we will not accept something which is having PAL until and unless you overtly declare it to us as PAL. Otherwise, your food safety management systems should ensure that cross-contamination does not happen. So that's one way, but others can add on.
Thank you so much. We can take quickly one more question from the audience. Do we have a question? Would kindly request you to raise your hand. So
just that, like, you know, maybe there is no question, just to, like, on an individual level, we discussed about, like, you know, what prevail and what we put. But then I feel that at the India level, the relevance of that data, because Satish touched about the global data which is present. But I would say that there is also a need to have Indian data, because I think most of us do not know what we are allergic of, right? And even though we are doing this prevention labeling, informing the consumer, but there has to be relevance of that with the Indian context. So I think that's also the need which should be done as a group together, you know, to get that data upcoming.
thank you so much, panel members. And Navneet ji, I think then with your permission, shall we wrap up the panel?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much. It was a privilege for all of us to be in this forum and share our thoughts with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for this wonderful panel here. And now I would like to call on stage Mr. Dhirendra Chaudhary, Chief Executive Officer from Bry-Air Asia Private Limited, to kindly do the honors of felicitating this wonderful panel. Dhirendra ji, thank you so much for doing the honors. We'll start with Satish Reddy ji. So, Satish Reddy, ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause. Head Quality Assurance, Dodla Dairy. Thank you so much, Satish ji, for wonderfully contributing in the panel session. Ms. Ranjeet Kaur, Program Lead, Scientific and Regulatory Affairs from Mars Wrigley. A big round of applause for Ms. Kaur for her wonderful contribution in the panel session. Mr. Prabhakar Mishra, Associate Director, Food Regulatory Affairs, Perfetti, Melle, India. A big round of applause to Prabhakar ji for his wonderful contribution in the panel session. Ms. Shreya Pandey, Associate Director, Regulatory Affairs from PepsiCo. A big round of applause to Shreya ji for her wonderful contribution in the panel session. Mr. Ritesh Madvaiya, Senior Manager Quality and Food Safety from India Head for Mars. A big round of applause to Ritesh ji for his wonderful contribution in the panel session. And our honorable panel moderator, Mr. Navneet Mehta, Global Quality Director, Food and Refreshments, Unilever. A big round of applause for Navneet ji for wonderfully moderating this fantastic panel session. I would request the panel members to kindly step forward for a group photograph, and Dhirendra ji, if you could also join them. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was the panel on food allergens, prevention, detection and management. Mr. Satish Reddy, Ms. Ranjeet Kaur, Mr. Prabhakar Mishra, Ms. Shreya Pandey, Mr. Ritesh Madvaiya and Mr. Navneet Mehta.